Well, hi guys, Coach Jerry here at The Protocol, and welcome to Coach's Corner. Today we're going to be talking about the kettlebell swing. I'm going to be sharing with you guys some of the big things that we're looking for a properly executed swing. We're filming this video right as we're starting our January swing challenge, so I felt that the timing of this was just about appropriate to make sure that you guys have all the tools that you need to make sure that you get the most out of the work that you're going to be doing this month. I'd like to begin today with a reading from the Gospel according to Mark. That's Mark Rifkin, for those of you who don't know him. So what he says here is, the truth is that a person would be hard-pressed to find a better movement that provides the same level of muscular, cardiovascular, and endurance conditioning all at the same time. An exercise that simultaneously challenges the posterior as well as the anterior muscle chains and everything else in between. One that increases an individual's base flexibility and mobility in the hips, lower back, and shoulders without doing any specialized work. One that is scalable to the 70-year-old grandmother as it is to the 20-year-old super athlete. In our community, the kettlebell and the swing are the center of our universe. So today, we're going to be deconstructing and going through some cues of this really important exercise. Now, before we get started with the things that I have on our agenda today, I want to mention two quick things. Number one, I've got a little bit of chalk on my hands just to keep that bell from slipping. Chalk is always your friend. Number two, I'm barefoot. Now, if you're not comfortable training barefoot or your gym does not allow barefoot training, you want to train in as hard and a flat of a sole shoe as possible. Nothing is harder than trying to do kettlebell swings in a big spongy shoe. Lastly, we want to mention that the kettlebell swing is a hinge pattern and not a squat. So what do I mean by that? A squat, the knees and the hips move at the same time. So like, let's say I was trying to jump up. I would go down to jump up. In a kettlebell swing, I am not trying to send energy up, I'm trying to send energy forward. So if in order to go up, I have to go down, in order to go forward, I have to go back. When you hinge back, your hips are going to move first. Your knees do bend, but they bend as an afterthought. Looks like this. So if you've gone somewhere and you've seen swings that are done like this, those swings are being done incorrectly. Find a better gym. Let's go ahead and get into today's cues. Number one, the back and the neck are neutral. So one of the things that you want to be careful of, the more years that I do this for a living, I notice that you can't do something in your cervical spine that doesn't affect your lumbar spine or your thoracic spine. The spine is not an independent series of discs. It is one instrument that moves together. And you can't, if you mess with one, you're messing with the whole thing. So what do I mean by that? When I shoot my hips back and I go into the back of my swing, this, to me, is over-cranking the neck. If I stood up straight, I would be in this position. And I don't want to be in this position. That's going to crank on the neck. So what I always imagine is having like a soft neck brace on your neck. So when you're in your backswing, yeah, my eyes are on the floor, maybe 5 or so feet out in front of me, but I'm not tucked and I'm not extended. So the neck sits nice and neutral. So the back is also neutral. Now, this is debated sometimes. A neutral spine and a vertical spine are not the same thing. So if you ever hear maintaining a vertical spine, that's not exactly what we're after here. So a vertical spine is upright. You can't swing a bell like this. So sometimes when people are new, they have this instinct like they need to keep their chest up and they try to swing, and it ends up not working. Depending on your levers, for example, I have super long legs and a super short torso. When I shoot my hips back, my spine is probably closer to being horizontal than it is even at a 45-degree angle. But what's important here is that it's neutral. In other words, not rounding the back, not overly extending. Just a nice neutral position. So that's number one. Number two, the feet are planted and the knees track the toes. So I'll show it to you from this angle here. This is one of the reasons that we're out of the shoes or in a hard sole shoe, is because you don't want to feel any wobble in your feet. You want to be able to root down into the ground. Imagine with your toes, you're trying to grab chunks of the floor that you're standing on. And when you do that, you're going to feel the arches of your feet pull up. It's like you're grabbing the floor. If you do that when you're doing swings, you're going to feel a lot more rooted and a lot less wobbly when you're trying to go through that move. Next, we have the shoulders are pulled down. One of the most common problems that we see is shrugging at the top. So the example that I give, if I were to take 2 of these dry erase markers and stick them under my armpits, I should be able to swing this kettlebell and still maintain fairly good technique. It's going to look a little weird when I pick it up and when I put it down because of the markers, but it looks like this. If I don't keep my shoulders pulled down, I'm going to lose those 2 markers. Pulling your shoulders down engages your lats and helps you connect to your abs. Your abs connect to the glutes. Glutes are connected to the legs, feet are planted in the floor. You have what we call a standing hollow position where everything is really tight at the top. The kettlebell handle stays above the knees. When you're swinging your kettlebell, the handle should never go below the knee line. So I'm not going to do this with the kettlebell because I don't want to hurt myself. If I came down like this, I'm too far down. You want to imagine one of the cues that we use is attacking the zipper. We're trying to shoot the kettlebell straight back and then we get out of its way at the last second. So the handle is above the knees. The kettlebell is high above the ground. One of the correctives that I use with some of my students is we'll take one of these competition kettlebells and I'll put it between their legs. And when they pick up their kettlebell, when they go to swing it, I'm going to move this back just a smidge. When they go to swing, I should be able to swing my kettlebell right now and have no risk of hitting the bell that is sitting in between my legs. So here's what it would look like. If I go too low, knock over that kettlebell, don't want to do that. Our next cue is in reference to the position of your wrists and your elbows. So what we have in here is that the wrists and the elbows remain straight at the bottom position. One of the common problems that we see when people are new to kettlebell swings is their wrists will break at the bottom of the movement. So what happens is the bell ends up kipping in the backswing. Sometimes I'll use the analogy of instead of swinging a kettlebell, you're swinging a bucket that's half full of water. If this was half full of water, I want to make sure that when I'm swinging it, at no point is water going to spill out. So if I let my wrists break in the backswing, that bucket is going to kick in that backswing and water will come spilling out. In this analogy, the water represents a loss of energy. And you don't want to lose energy. You're trying to send all that energy forward. So an example would be, it's the difference between having the backswing look like this versus looking like this. And right away, I can feel my energy getting zapped. The elbow staying straight is also another common problem for beginners. They have too much tension in their grip and in the belt, so when they get into that backswing, the elbows don't go straight. You want to imagine your arms getting as long as possible. Sometimes I'll use the cue of having like a cheap wooden fence behind you, and you're trying to knock that fence down so you can put up a nice one. And what you're going to do is use the ball of that kettlebell to go through that fence. So when you watch this from the side, the ball of the kettlebell should be farther back than my butt. Straight arm, straight back. Okay, so our next cue here is no scooping, i.e. the knees do not move forward on the upswing. Sometimes people have a tendency, instead of extending their hips straight out, straight forward when they're coming into the top of the swing, they will kind of bend their knees and kind of like scoop their hips forward and try to use the front side of their body to drive the bell up. Remember, this is a posterior chain dominant exercise. You don't want to be doing that. Next on our agenda, we have the head, the shoulders, the hips, and the knees are fully extended at the top. What does that mean? If I were to take one of these dowel rods here, and I had that dowel rod on my back, I should feel that dowel rod in 3 positions when I'm standing up. I should feel it on the back of my head, in between my shoulder blades, and the top of my tailbone. If I was hunched over, I would lose the connection on the back of my head, If I was overly extended, I'd feel it in my head and my tailbone, but not in between my shoulders, and so on and so forth. Now, once you find those three positions, when I go into my backswing, I should also feel those same 3 points of contact. Again, if I round my back in the swing, I'm going to lose 2 of those points of contact. I'm just going to feel it between my shoulder blades, not on the tailbone, not on the head. So we want to make sure that this position stays nice and straight. At the top, we have full extension. So again, the shoulders are pulled down like we already covered, and everything is nice and tall and nice and tight. If you're getting longer in the tooth like me, one of the first places that you're going to lose this is on the back of your head. We have a tendency to keep our head forward. You want to try to resist the signs of Father Time catching up to you. Next, we have the arms are parallel to the floor at the top. This simply means that if you're swinging here, you're swinging too high. I would have lost my magic markers if I was up here. Don't want to do that. Is there such a thing as too low? If you're swinging a really, really heavy kettlebell, probably not. If I was swinging like, say, the 48 kilo, it may only get up to my belly button, and that's okay. But what's important when you're doing general work with moderately weighted bells with lots of reps, you want to imagine that your arms are completely parallel to the floor. Similarly, cue number 9 up here, the elbows, the wrists, and the arms form a straight line at the top. So this is it's a similar analogy, but again, we don't want to be letting our wrists flex or extend when we're at the top, and we don't want to be letting our elbows bend more than they need to. A little bit of an elbow bend is okay. This is especially the case on a two-hand swing when you have both hands around one skinny handle. Sometimes it's hard to extend and maintain the shoulders being pulled down. Tiny bend is okay. Anything more than that is probably too much. We do sometimes see folks that kind of have this at the top of their swing. We call this a T-Rex swing. So we want to be careful not to be doing that. Next, the kettlebell floats momentarily at the top. All of the work on your swing is being generated in this backswing. Once I shoot my hips forward, there's a momentary float. You don't have to do this when you're swinging, but this is just an example of what that might look like. In my mind's eye, at the top of that swing, the kettlebell is floating in midair. Don't have to do that, but in your mind's eye, just imagine that it's floating. Up next, we have the breath work, how we should be breathing. You may have heard this in the couple reps that I was demonstrating. When you send the kettlebell back, you want to take a sharp inhale through your nose. That inhale tightens your abs, engages the hamstrings. When you come up, you hiss the air out. That's a power breath that also keeps the abs contracted and the glutes very tight. So we call that the biomechanical breathing match. And that's how we work on that. Okay, next we have the quads and the glutes visibly contract and are held at the top. The thing that I like to show people is from the front position. If I were to squeeze my glutes right now, you should be able to tell that I did it. Here we go. You could see, you didn't have to stand behind me to notice that I was squeezing my glutes. When you get up to the top, you want to contract your glutes. At the top of the swing, if I punched you in the stomach, I break my hand, and if I kicked you in the butt, I break my foot. This connection between the abs and the glutes is what protects your lower back at the top of the swing so it doesn't have to work. Similarly, in the backswing, it's your hamstrings that protect your back in the backswing, which is why we want to make sure we're doing the hinge and not the squat. Also important on that is that they are held at the top. So while you are at the top and the bell is floating, this stays engaged. It doesn't disengage until the kettlebell falls and you shoot back into the back of that swing. Lastly, the kettlebell moves like a pendulum. The weight of the bell takes the body back, and then the hips propel the kettlebell forward. The easiest way that I can explain this to new folks is when you're a beginner and you're doing this without a kettlebell, you almost want to imagine 4 movements. So movement number 1 is your arms coming down with the weight. Movement number 2, the hips shoot back. Movement number 3, the hips shoot forward. And now notice my arms are still glued here. Lastly, move number 4, the arms then leave. So it goes like this. 1, 2, 3, 4. If you take a video of you doing swings in real time and you watch it frame by frame, it should look like that. An example of doing it wrong would be having everything bend at once, and then arms leave first and body follows. One of my mentors, Sergio, used to always tell people the amount of time that your bicep is glued to the rib cage should be as long as possible. So I make the connection, I'm still connected, still connected, still connected, still connected, still connected, still connected, and at the very last second, my bicep connection to the rib cage is lost. So it looks more like you're trying to load up a spring and shoot it forward. As a matter of fact, if you're doing this outside on a grassy field where you're not endangering anyone or anything, there's a fun little drill. We used to do this in certifications where we would have people line up and we'd have kettlebells out. We would have somebody take 3 swings, and on the 3rd swing, they let the kettlebell go. And whoever can send their bell the farthest forward wins. So again, it just gives you that mindset of I'm trying to send all that energy back and generate all that force through my hips, because if I try to throw it with my arm, say like for guys we're using a 24-kilo bell, it's not going to go very far with my arm, but with that big hip drive, I can send that bell a lot farther. So guys, this is just sort of the surface stuff that we're looking for. These are the general things. We will be having some workshops here at the gym. If you've ever wanted to learn more about how to do kettlebell work properly, you can follow the links in the description below. We'll see you again next time.